Hello and welcome to Health Talk. I'm Julie Banderas. According to the CDC, 91 Americans die from overdoses every day. Since many stories of addiction begin with a doctor's prescription pad, a new documentary is taking a look at how they may have unknowingly played a role in the epidemic. Dr. Feelgood, dealer or healer, tells the story of William Hurwitz, a pain specialist who was sentenced to 25 years in prison for drug trafficking. Here to tell us more, the film's director and producer, Eve Marson. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
First of all, tell us about Dr. Hurwitz. What happened?
Sure. So Dr. Hurwitz was arrested and sentenced to 25 years in prison for overprescribing painkillers. The interesting thing about this case is that it's not totally clear-cut. So his motives are unclear when I started looking at this case. So you have patients on some side saying he was a hero to me and he gave me these pills that nobody else would give me and he got me out of bed and he saved my life. And on the other side, you have some of his patients who became not only addicted to the drugs, but started dealing the drugs up and down the eastern seaboard.
Do you believe he was aware that his patients were addicted to the drugs?
It's a tough question to answer, and I think he would say that he wasn't, or that even if he were, he felt that as a doctor, it's perhaps not his place to make a determination,
right?
Whether they're doing something illegal or whether they might.
And that's
have
a good point, because they are not psychiatrists, and he is a pain specialist. So I guess make the case for him being a healer.
Sure. I mean, so right? He would say he's not only not as. It's not even about psychiatry, maybe, but he's also not a policeman. So, if you're a doctor, primary reason many people become a doctor is to help people and to relieve their suffering. So if a patient comes to him and says, I have this chronic pain, I can't get out of bed in the morning, and here are these pills which are effective like nothing else, and really let people live their lives. And chronic pain is something that I was surprised to learn affects 1 out of 3 Americans. So from thinking of it that way, he was helping people to function.
Yeah, no, chronic pain is an awful, awful thing, and a lot of people, more than we know. Everyone knows someone who suffers from it, and it is debilitating.
Yes.
And you cannot live without these pills for a lot of people. But make the case, though, what's the difference between, that line where he's a healer, but now make him a dealer?
Right. I think that's part of the tricky thing is where is that line, right? And so for a lot of these patients, if they come and they start in pain, then perhaps there's a point where they're taking pills and then, they're feeling good, and then maybe they're using them not to relieve pain, but to just, feel even better. And then once there's such a price for them on the black market, many of his, or some of his patients were dealing them. So then you get into a trouble ground where not only is he prescribing addicts more pills, but those pills are getting onto the street and into the hands of
How
of
common
people
is
who don't
this
have pain.
for people who deal with this sort of thing, these types of doctors? I mean, is it something that you see often, or is this a rare
I think so. It's
occurrence?
tricky because pain is something that can't be quantified. There's no test to measure for pain.
Right.
Doctors are put in a really hard position where a patient comes to them and describes the amount of pain they're in, and a doctor sort of has to trust them or not trust them. And I think in either case, it can lead to bad results.
Well, absolutely. And a doctor wants to keep their patients happy, and they also want to keep their patients, period. So, I mean, if a patient comes in and complains of a pain, what's to say that the doctor is going to ignore that? You can't just simply say, I'm sorry, I don't believe you. So then if you do believe that person, I mean, I would think that it would be a very hard conviction unless you were to determine that they were actually dealing it and they were aware that these drugs were then being sold on the black market.
That's right.
But to come out with a conviction on something like this, I would imagine would be a tricky one. So, I mean, this guy definitely had to have had his hands dirty, and there had to have been plenty of evidence.
There is, but
to show that there had to have been some kind of knowing of wrongdoing.
The film looks at exactly that. So his original sentence was 25 years, and he was found guilty of drug trafficking. But as the film shows, the sentence was overturned on an appeal. So there is a different legal argument that emerges. So the film looks at all of those factors of how did he end up getting convicted, and then how did he end up getting the appeal. So it traces those events and also looks at the different testimonies of his patients who have differing opinions of him, the law enforcers who were pursuing him, and then other doctors weighing in.
Where can people get more information?
We have our website, drfeelgoodfilm.com, and we are also, the film is being distributed at the end of this month. It'll be available on iTunes and Amazon and all those places January 31st.
All right, Eve Marson, thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate you coming on, and if you've got a health question, you can tweet at Dr. Manny on Fox. Until next time, I'm Julie Banderas.